Behind the bleach-blonde hair and the devil-may-care grin, Paul isn't just the wild spirit of the Lost Boys. His story began in the picture-perfect suburbs of the 1950s, a world built on smiles and lies. From the silver bracelet gifted by a greaser who saved his life, to the fateful meeting with David, Marco, and Dwayne, Paul's journey is a descent from pain into liberation, from silence into music, from victim to reborn creature of the night. This video uncovers the hidden symbolism, emotional layers, and tragic beauty of Paul's origin, and asks why he smiled when he became a monster and why sometimes the night is kinder than the day. If you love mythology, vampire lore, and cinematic storytelling, subscribe to Tales Mythology and ring the bell for upcoming deep dives. Neon light flickers across a weather-beaten boardwalk. Laughter echoes sharp, wild, and electric. There he is, Paul. The bleach-blonde hair, the mischievous grin, the chaotic charm. You think you know him. The playful one, the joker of the Lost Boys, the one who dances under the moon like he owns it. But what if that grin isn't joy? What if it's armor? Behind that laughter is a story few have dared to imagine, a story soaked in loneliness, anger, and the desperate hunger for freedom. Paul's journey doesn't begin in the night. It begins in sunlight, the cruelest light of all. 1950s Florida, the era of perfection. White picket fences, pastel kitchens, jingles on the radio promising happiness. But inside one of those polished homes lived a boy whose world was quietly crumbling. From the outside, the family looked perfect. His father a successful car salesman, with a smile big enough to sell anything. His mother the archetype of the era, pretty, polished, endlessly smiling in photographs. But perfection is often the best disguise for rot. Behind closed doors, the American dream was a nightmare. The father's voice became a whip, the mother's silence a blade. Paul, the youngest of three, was the family's scapegoat, too loud, too restless, too different. In a world obsessed with control, Paul was born uncontrollable. Teachers called him disruptive. His brothers called him a mistake. His parents called him broken. He wasn't broken. He was alive in a place that only tolerated the dead quiet of obedience. Every punishment carved a new rule into his bones. Don't speak. Don't move. Don't exist too loudly. But deep down, something in Paul refused to die. One humid night in 1948, at just 8 years old, Paul ran away, barefoot, clutching a metal lunchbox filled with his favorite toys, small soldiers, a comic, a chocolate bar. He followed the railroad tracks like they were a path to heaven. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew anywhere had to be better than home. But fate doesn't always let you go easily. His foot slipped between the steel rails, wedged tight. Then came the roar. A train, fast and blinding, bearing down on him like destiny itself. And then a motorcycle. A flash of chrome. A rush of wind. A man young, leather-clad, cigarette between his lips swooped in, grabbing Paul seconds before the train thundered past. You got guts, kid, he said. They rode to a diner. The jukebox played Good Rockin' Tonight. Paul ate fries for the first time in months that weren't cold leftovers. The stranger taught him how to dance, how to laugh. For a few hours, Paul lived inside a dream of freedom. Before leaving, the man handed him a small silver bracelet. Don't let anyone tell you who to be, he said. Paul's eyes burned. Will I ever see you again? Maybe, the man said with a grin. If you ever get tired of cages. That night, Paul hid the bracelet under his pillow. When his parents found out he'd run away, they called the police, beat him, grounded him for weeks. They found the bracelet, said it was filth. Paul dug it out of the trash and wore it again the next day. That bracelet, silver, cold, beautiful, became the symbol of who he wanted to be. He just didn't know that one day it would glitter under moonlight, soaked in blood. By the time Paul turned 13, music had become his only escape. He'd sneak into the basement, spinning stolen records on his brother's turntable. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis Presley. Each note was rebellion, each beat a small act of war. When Elvis first appeared on TV, Paul watched, wide-eyed, from the hallway. For once, someone moved like he felt inside. His father turned the set off in disgust. Trash, he spat. That's not music. That sign. That night, Paul's room was stripped bare. No posters, no records, no toys, just a bed, a Bible, and walls that seemed to close in tighter with every breath. He didn't cry. He just hummed softly, the melody looping in his head like a secret. In a way, this was the first spark of what would later become his power. The ability to survive by transforming pain into rhythm, fear into laughter, silence into song. One night, after detention, Paul walked home through flickering streetlights. He was 16 now, thin, pale, and already halfway invisible. Then headlights, laughter, the rumble of motorcycles. 3 figures coasted into view. Leather, sunglasses, the smell of gasoline and freedom. David, Marco, Dwayne. They looked like danger dressed in style. David grinned. You look lost, kid. Paul shrugged. Maybe I am. They offered him a ride. A milkshake. A conversation that didn't hurt. In their company, Paul felt something new belonging. They didn't care about his fidgeting or the way his mind spun in loops. They liked it, encouraged it. David said, "The world's full of cages, Paul. You just have to choose who you let lock you up." He didn't realize then that freedom sometimes wears fangs. Paul's parents found out about his new friends. Delinquents, they called them. Hoodlums. The shouting never stopped. His father talked about sending him away, straightening him out, making him a man. That night, Paul packed again, but he wasn't alone this time. David and the others were waiting outside his window. They promised him a life with no rules, a family that actually cared. When his parents burst into his room, the confrontation turned violent. Screams, broken glass, then silence. Paul doesn't remember the details, only flashes. Fangs, blood, the smell of iron. When it was over, the house was quiet. The lost boy stood in the ruins. David touched Paul's shoulder. You're free now. Paul didn't feel fear. He felt peace. He looked at David, not as a monster, but as a savior. And when David offered him blood, Paul drank. It wasn't damnation. It was deliverance. The transformation was fire. Every heartbeat cracked open like thunder. Every sense exploded sound sharper, air sweeter, light unbearable. He ran into the night, tearing through the streets. He laughed until his throat ached. He danced in the surf. He wasn't the boy who hid in the basement anymore. He was something wild, something beautiful. He smashed the mirror that once reflected shame and stared into the pieces. Each shard showed a different version of him: boy, ghost, vampire, survivor. He picked one up, grinned, and said, "Nice to meet you." From that night on, Paul became the music. He danced on rooftops, sang in tunnels, teased the moon itself. He vowed never to be silenced again. Among the lost boys, Paul found something precious: home. Marco became his closest friend, maybe more. Their laughter filled the boardwalk. They shared everything: music, secrets, blood. David was the leader, yes, but to Paul, he was also the one who taught him to break his chains. Together, they lived in eternal rebellion, surfing through neon nights, taunting mortality, existing in that space between dream and nightmare. Paul's ADHD, once punished, became part of his charm. His energy made him magnetic, his laughter contagious. He became what he'd always been told not to be: loud, wild, alive. Freedom always asks for payment. Sometimes Paul would catch his reflection in the waves and see flashes of his old self. The boy hiding in corners, the boy who wanted love, not blood. Sometimes, when the music faded, he heard echoes of his mother's voice, or the train, or the greaser who saved him. He'd grip the bracelet tight and whisper, "Thank you." He knew what he had become, but he also knew he'd been a ghost long before he died. In the mythology of the Lost Boys, Paul often feels like the comic relief, the smirk behind the chaos. But under that laughter lies something more profound, a symbol of transformation. His story asks a question most vampire tales avoid. What if becoming a monster is healing? Paul's vampirism wasn't punishment, it was reclamation. He turned trauma into rebellion, silence into song, pain into power. In that way, Paul represents every person who's ever been told they were too loud, too emotional, too strange, and decided to own it instead. There's an old saying, freedom is born the moment you stop asking permission. Paul stopped asking. In the end, he's more than a vampire. He's a metaphor for survival, for art, for joy in defiance. The silver bracelet still gleams on his wrist, the same one from that long ago rescue, the same one that told him freedom was real. It's his reminder that sometimes the monsters in the night are kinder than the ones in daylight. Paul's story teaches us that liberation doesn't always look pure. Sometimes it's messy, loud, dangerous, but it's real. The point isn't that he escaped his pain, it's that he transformed it. And in doing so, he became the most human monster of them all. So if you've ever been told you're too much, if you've ever been silenced, if you've ever felt trapped, remember Paul, the boy who became the night, and smiled anyway.